The Pentagon has banned TikTok from government devices, but officials may still use it on their personal electronics. Some see this as concerning because cell phones are essentially tracking devices, reporting data from inside bases or hostile locations. The military in 2018 banned fitness tracking apps for deployed troops after the app Strava released a heat map showing exercise routes that revealed the locations of sensitive overseas bases. China and Saudi Arabia have signed a series of strategic deals during Chinese leader Xi Jinping's trip to the kingdom. Xi is heralding what he calls a new era in Arab ties. The visit is seen as an attempt to solidify relations in a region crucial to his country's energy needs. The trip also marks a further move by Xi to restore his global profile after spending most of the pandemic inside China. Let's bring in Wisconsin Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher. He's a Marine veteran serving on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, and he will be heading up a task force on China in the next Congress. Congressman, thanks for being here. I want to talk to you about China and what you're looking at ahead, but first I want to talk about this trade with Brittany Griner coming home to the U.S. Your thoughts, your impressions?
Well, anytime an American comes home, we're happy for them, we're happy for their family, but it's a terrible trade. You look at the comparison here, there's no equal playing field. I mean, we're talking about a convicted terrorist, an arms dealer, someone referred to as the merchant of death, versus someone that was taken hostage in Brittany Griner for a trumped-up drug charge. So not an even trade. We also left an American behind in the form of Bill Whalen, who's still there in Russia. And I think the broader concern is that this sends a signal that if you are a rogue regime or an enemy of America and you want to improve your geopolitical position, take American hostage, because it's not just this isolated incident. We also had the incident before where the Biden administration released a sanctions violator and high-level executive at Huawei to secure the release of the so-called two Mikes, Canadian citizens that were detained for no good reason by the Chinese Communist Party. So we don't want to send that signal of weakness that incentivizes hostage-taking going forward.
Well, here's what the administration is saying in the form of John Kirby from the White House.
It was a tough decision, but it was a better decision than doing nothing, because it was either get Brittany out using Mr. Boot or get nobody out. And I think we can all agree that it's better to have Brittany Griner soon on American soil rather than spending years and years in prison for a crime she didn't commit.
Does it not encourage more abductions, more taking prisoners in order to use them to get these people back?
Yeah, to some degree, Martha, that ship has sailed. I mean, this is not a new tactic for Mr. Putin. This idea of wrongfully detaining Americans in return for, to try to get somebody else back or to get some other concession. This is part of Mr. Putin's playbook.
So that's their answer, Congressman.
Well, I think the White House is offering a false choice. The reality is that if you're negotiating from a position of strength, I got to believe that it's possible we could have gotten both Americans. It's also not just Griner, Whalen versus Victor Boot. We're talking about the impact on other Americans in other countries, other hostages that have been taken. We're talking about the broader impact on our entire foreign policy. So I don't accept that logic from John Kirby. Again, I'm happy for Brittany Griner. I'm happy for her family, but we have to consider the overall impact on our standing in the world.
All right, I want to bring you to China and the new job you're taking, heading up this committee. What are you looking to accomplish with that in the new Republican Congress?
Well, the Select Committee on China, which is going to be a signature initiative for Speaker-elect Kevin McCarthy, I think a lot of what we can do is to explain the stakes to the American people, explain why we need to understand who we're dealing with in the form of the Chinese Communist Party, and why we're in the early stages of a new Cold War. And owing to a combination of complacency and corruption, it's not obvious that we are going to win. We need to inject a sense of urgency into our effort. The other thing I would say is that the predecessor to this, the China Task Force, led by Chairman Mike McCall, tried to get Democrats to participate in it. Kevin McCarthy opened that up to Democrats. They refused for partisan purposes. We want this to be a bipartisan effort. We want the Democrats to nominate serious, sober people to participate, because defending America from Chinese Communist Party aggression should not be a partisan thing.
You mentioned it, Speaker-elect McCarthy. He's obviously not there with the votes yet. You're confident he's going to get there?
I am confident. Kevin's doing a remarkable job in terms of reaching out to members who aren't committed to vote for him yet and asking, okay, what are your concerns? Where can we meet in the middle in terms of rules changes? And so I think we will get there. We're going to have a couple weeks here to make sure we continue to advance down that road. But I think the fact that he's choosing to elevate the issue of China and instantiate a select committee on China is something the entire conference can get behind. He's going to prioritize that. He's going to prioritize fiscal responsibility. That's long overdue, and it's one of many reasons why I think he deserves to be Speaker.
You know, there have been select committees on China before. The last public report was back in 1999, U.S. national security, military, commercial concerns with China. And it goes on to say that the appetite of China for information and technology appears to be insatiable. The energy devoted to this task is enormous. Threats to national security can come from PRC scientists, students, business people, or bureaucrats, in addition to professional civilian and military intelligence operations. That's 1999. We are now 23 years later. What has changed? We really have not affected the situation, the ground on which the U.S. and China are competing.
Well, what's changed is the Chinese Communist Party is much more powerful. And Xi Jinping himself, the general secretary of the Xi Jinping, is much more powerful than his predecessors. I mean, look what's happening with TikTok right now. TikTok is on the cusp of becoming the most dominant media company in America. And it is controlled by ByteDance, which is effectively controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. It's as if in 1958, we decided to let Pravda and the KGB buy up the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, ABC, and NBC all at once. That actually probably understates the stupidity. No country with even a passing interest in its own security would allow this to happen. So China has blended the realm of the private sector and the military and total state control, and ultimately everything leads back to the control of the Chinese Communist Party.
You have a young daughter, I don't think age of TikTok, but I have kids that are on TikTok. If you're talking to a parent, knowing what you know, what would you tell them tonight about TikTok on their phones?
It's not just about silly dance videos. You're giving the Chinese Communist Party the ability to collect information on the location of your kids, on the keystrokes of your kids, on what websites they visit, even when they're not using the app directly. Compile a dossier on your children and put aside the extraordinarily addictive quality and the lack of transparency around the algorithm. That's why FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr has called it digital fentanyl. And it is destructive and addicted and increasing the loneliness and isolation that's leading many of our kids to choose a path of suicide and depression. So all parents, I would urge them to get their kids off this app before it's too late.
I'm going to have you call my boys later tonight. Congressman Gallagher, I really appreciate the time.
Thank you.